Okay, welcome back. We are here today to talk about little stones. Little bitty tiny stones. Welcome to module 8. This here is a little tiny amethyst. It doesn't want to focus on it. This is a cut stone. So this is kind of in that diamond shape where there's a point at the bottom, and then there's kind of this widest point here, and then it kind of goes in a little bit, and then there's a flat, what they call a table on the top. So there are different parts of this kind of cut stone. You don't have to use a cut stone like this. I have some other tiny little, these are garnets, and this is a cabochon. So again, this has the flat back and a domed, it's a very low dome top. And they're about, I don't know, a 6 millimeter round cabochon. So these come in all different, shapes and sizes and thicknesses and everything else. You can use either of these shapes. I want you to not be afraid of any of these shapes. They work, I don't know, they're a lot of fun to work with. So a couple of different things. There's this particular setting here. Now this is really just a couple of coils, and that kind of widest part of this diamond-shaped stone is caught in between these two coils. Now, I don't know if you can see that, but there's a little bit of movement. I can actually, it's really hard to get this setting tight. Another reason that I'm skeptical of this setting, and I don't actually use it myself in any of my jewelry, is that I'm always nervous that this top coil is going to catch on, your hair or a scarf or something, and it's just going to lift right up, and then you're just going to lose your stone. If you do want to try this setting, I can show you really super quick. I've got just a piece of 20 gauge wire here. I've got another little amethyst stone, and I've got my bail making pliers. And so now my bail making pliers are just a little bit smaller than the widest part of my stone. Okay, if I center my stone there, it's just sticking out a little bit wider than this jaw of my pliers. So what I would do then is just basically make a couple of coils. So if I already had a piece I was working on and I had like some wire ends, I would just like do this next to where it was coming out of my piece, and just do this with one of my tails. So I've basically got two coils here. You probably have to like separate them out just a little bit to create some room in between them. And then you can kind of almost corkscrew your stone into it. It's, I don't know, I don't do these very often. Sometimes you can even get them so they are tight, but it's rare. I find most of the time. Oops, I'm just snapping it in. Most of the time these end up a little bit loose there. So that's in there, and it's still a little bit wobbly. I could probably squish these together. I'm always tempted when I see these, when my two base wires are coming off the same side over here, I'm always tempted to like put a couple of stitches and stitch these two together, because that's the weak point in this particular holding, is that one of these spirals is just going to lift up and you're just going to lose your stone. Okay, so that's really the risk with this particular setting, and that's the reason that I don't particularly like to use this setting in my own pieces. Now, it's an easy setting. This is going to be the easiest way to grab onto this shape of stone. So like, I get the temptation in the beginning to use this, but use it with caution. Use it maybe in recessed places where this wire can't catch on anything and nothing can get underneath of it to bring it up. You might even want to bring this around the bottom again to protect the bottom of the stone a little bit. I mean, this is all things that you can play with, and you can come to your own conclusions how you feel about this particular setting. My personal feelings are I stay away from it. I don't use it at all. But I did want to talk about it, and I did want to acknowledge that it's out there, and I did want to talk about why I don't use it and some of its weak points. And so now you can decide for yourself if this is a setting that you want to proceed with, that you want to try. and maybe decide like, oh, well, if one comes out here and I bring this out the other side, well, now there's less to get caught on things. I don't know. Play with that. It's kind of a neat, easy way to catch a little tiny stone like this. But I'm not going to focus on that this module, okay? I just wanted to give you a really quick, like, this is a how-to if you want to do that. It kind of works. It mostly works. I don't know. I'm always a little bit skeptical of it myself, though. So do this setting with caution. I do want to spend some time, you've seen this bracelet before, talking about this setting here. Now you can do this. These are all with diamond shaped stones. These are not real diamonds. By that I mean they've got the point on the back side and this table on the front, and they're faceted. Faceted is when you have all these angled flat sides, and that faceting is what gives these type of stones this sparkle. Okay, I've got another piece over here with some peridot, some little oval peridots that I mounted against this parrot wing jasper. These also have pointed backs, but they're very, very flat. So they've got a very different shape between the oval and the pavilion, the pointy part being just not as tall. So that worked with this too, but it did take some fiddling to keep them all lined up this long way. I've got one more little piece here. This was just a little garnet that I put in there. This piece here, I love this piece. These are not diamond shaped ones. These are little flat backed, like iron-on Swarovski little shiny crystals in my ammonite here. I did want to talk about this piece in particular for just a second, because if you do want a curve in this piece between your stones, you need to shape this curve as you're working, okay? You can't mount all of these stones in a straight piece and then curve it after and expect these stones to still be held securely. You really need to put this curve into your base wires as you're weaving and as you're working. So I did want to point that out there. All the rest of these pieces, oh, and actually I was going to take off the one that I'm wearing as well. This is always a piece that gets a lot of attention. There's a big piece of fluorite in there. I don't know if you can see the rainbow colors, the blues and the greens and the purples. And then I've got a couple of little amethysts mounted on here. This was the very first time I ever did this. This is sort of where I kept this piece, because I was a little skeptical. I spent a lot of time making sure these stones were tight, and I've worn this piece almost every day for a good 2 years solid now. And this is still going strong. These have held up and proven the test of time around my own neck. So I really like this way of setting little tiny stones. I didn't have a plan for this piece when I made it. I kind of just started wrapping, once it was made, I started just wrapping it around this piece of fluorite, and then my wires weren't long enough and I had to add more wires over here, and so I had more to work with. And this piece was really an evolution. The farther I went, the more I kind of just made it up, and I was really happy with how it turned out. This is one of my favorite pieces still to this day. But I did want to just show you these two little amethysts on here as well. So I want to show you how to do this today. When I do this, I always use a half round wire to capture my stone. I do that for a couple of reasons. The flat side of the half round wire that's down, that's touching the stone, because it's got that flat surface area, it's actually got more surface area to grab, okay? That flat surface against the flat surface creates more friction and actually grabs onto that stone a lot better than if you just used a round wire. So on this piece I've got a round wire, 2 half round wires, and then another round base wire. And that's how I made this piece here. This one is pretty much exactly the same. I've got a round base wire, 2 half round base wires, and then another round base wire. And so my 2 half rounds are always in the middle. They always kind of come up on this angle where they go out like this. And that's what gives them kind of that little edge of an angle that rides the edge of the stone. And then they come in again on the other side and come together in the middle for the next patch of this kind of weaving. I have done weaving behind the stone, so the stone is completely held with this strip of weaving. And I do this strip of weaving before I start any of the pendant stuff. I always mount these stones first so that you can focus on that and do it correctly. And then once I have my stones mounted, I then proceed to put the piece kind of around whatever I'm making and start to shape my actual finished pendant. Sometimes it takes a little bit of planning. When I went to do this one, I actually had to make sure I had some half round wires in amongst my round wires here so that I could come up and grab these stones when I needed to. So yeah, let's get started. I've already got some wires cut here. I've got 2 half round wires. So now these are 16 gauge half round wires, okay? I don't remember exactly what the thickness is this way, the narrow way, but it is exactly the thickness, I measured it upstairs, as these 21 gauge round wires. If you have just done the beginner module 1 at the beginning and then like jumped right here for some reason because you're like, I know all this stuff. If you can't weave without bending your base wires, go back, practice some of the weaves in some of the earlier modules. It's really important when you go to these thinner base wires that you can weave these flawlessly without mangling these base wires. These are very thin base wires, especially the 21 gauge ones. And if you don't already know how to do weaving around thin base wires without making them seriously out of shape, then this project is just going to cause you a ton of grief. And I don't want you to be frustrated. So go back, practice your weaves, go back to some of those other modules. If you can weave around a thin base wire without bending it, then you are in the right place. Welcome. We are going to have some fun here. I am going to start with a modified sumac. I'm actually going to start with 3 coils because I just have to anchor my wire. This is one of my round base wires. I cut 3 round wires thinking I'm going to put 1 in the middle in between these 2. That's optional. Sometimes it depends on how big of a stone that you want to mount, okay? How many base wires you want. You want this weaving to end up being as wide as your stone, and that's going to help protect the sides of your stone. You don't want your stone a whole lot wider, but you also don't want it a whole lot narrower. You want this weaving to be about the same width as your stone. So that's why the number of base wires you have is going to vary. If I needed an even number of base wires, say 6, I would probably do 2 round ones on the outside and then my 2 half rounds and then the other 2 round ones on the other side. But because I need an odd number and I want my half round wires to be centered, I am actually going to put that 3rd base wire in between them. Now I'm just trying to decide, that's the flat side, that's the half round side. We are going to have a top and a bottom on this. So I need to just start my modified sumac, go around there, and now I do want to grab some nylon jaw pliers and make sure this half round wire stays flat. It's gonna, especially these first few rows, it's gonna wanna like twist a little bit, and just by super gently squeezing it flat, it's gonna make sure that it stays flat and doesn't like twist up on its side. So let's grab another one of these round wires. I am, just for the moment, weaving fairly close to the end of my wires. I'm gonna move these base wires into position before I ever have to capture one of my small stones, okay? But just to get me started here, over the next one, up in between them, bring in my next half round, make sure I have the half round side the same orientation as my other one. So in this case the flat side is down and the half round is up. I do want to just make sure that that's like in the same orientation and not twisting up to the side. My last base wire. There we go. down around that last one. So now, if you remember the modified sumac, we got to switch directions. So I go around the top again. My long stitch is now in the back. My short stitches, oh come on, go around there. There we go. And now in the front. There we go. This first one especially, take your time, making sure everything is doing what it's supposed to. I can already see this one starting to twist a little bit. I don't want that, so just going to get to the end, squish that. Okay, that's looking good. Let's move that out a little. Alright, I'm just going to do a few rows of these to really establish a strong, secure starting point, that everything's solid, and when I start bending these base wires, they're not going to like flop all over the place. I want at least a few rows of weaving here to start. I'm being very gentle because I just found some metal jawed pliers here, and anytime you grab, you know, your fine weave wire, this is a 26 gauge weave wire, you want to be gentle because you can damage this weaving that you've done, and that's not going to help anybody. Alright, do a few rows of this. I hope this is review. I'm not kind of going over the details. My long stitches in the back right now. And then around the end a second time, moving my long stitch from the back to the front. Let's just move that. And up in between, long stitch in the front, up in between. Alright, so once you have a few rows of weaving, this is pretty minimal. I'm going to do just a couple more rows so that it's really good. I just don't want to rush this, so I'm sorry. We might have to edit this out. These are twisting around. That doesn't ever help the situation, does it? So I'm going to just do some more of this weaving, and I will be back when I've done some more weaving. Alright, welcome back. I have done just a little bit more weaving, not like a ton, and I started pulling these out, but I do want to pull them out just a little bit more. I do want kind of wire on each end. It's going to make it a little tougher to do my weaving with these longer tails. That's why I don't start with these longer tails, but I do want some space to work with. Alright, this is the tail I'm looking for. Another thing I'm doing is I'm making my half round wires just ever so much longer than my round wires, and that's because I need a little bit more distance, because these are the ones that have to kind of go up and over the stone, whereas the round ones just go straight. So I am going to mount two different stones for you. I'm going to mount this one amethyst stone, and this is the amethyst stone that I've chosen because it's the right width for this particular weave that I've started. The other stone I'm going to mount is this flat back Swarovski, and again, I've chosen this one because it's the right width for this piece of weaving that I'm doing. So I have to choose one of these and do them one at a time. The first thing I need to do is make sure my weaving is super, super tight. And then let's do my amethyst one first. I am going to lift up my half round wires. So this is this one on this side, and I'm going to kind of lift it up on an angle, so it's V'ing out away from here, and I'm going to do the same on the other side. So I lift it up on an angle so it kind of creates this V, okay? Can you see that? They're not going straight up. I kind of bent them up and out a little bit. So from here, we actually have to support the back of the stone on here. Now this middle wire is actually going to make this difficult for this pointy backed stone. Normally when I do the pointy backed, I'll just have the outside wires, and then I'll do a figure 8 weave, which kind of makes a low spot in the middle where this other wire is, and that low spot in the middle captures the point on the bottom of the stone really nice and kind of wedges it in place. I'm gonna have to do something a little bit different to make room for that point on this one. And I'm literally just going to bend this one out of the way, and I can bring it up in behind and nobody will ever see it. And I'm basically just going to use these outside 2 wires to wrap with my figure 8 weave. So hopefully you remember that. So just ignore this middle wire. There's kind of wires going all over the place. When you're doing this, you always get a little bit of a gap on these outside ones right where your half round wires bend up. That's sort of just unavoidable. It's the space that your half round wires take up when they do that bend. So I'm gonna go around the other wire here twice, remember? Always, always twice. And now back to the first one. Now remember with this weave, these base wires always want to come together, especially since we're using such thin little base wires on this particular job. This is not an easy thing to do, to weave this figure 8 around these base wires and not have them go in and not mangle them. All of these things are challenges. That's why this is one of the last modules we're doing. This is not something that you should be attempting as a very, very beginner wire weaver, because you'll get frustrated, and I don't want you to be frustrated. I want you to get these skills first. I can see these 2 wires, they're not doing too bad, but they're already starting to go in just a little bit. I do want to squish this up tight. Now I'm going to keep doing this until I have enough width so that it's going to create about a square of this wire, okay? Because it needs to be long enough as it is wide so that this fits on top of this weaving. So I'm just going to keep going, and this is what's going to support the back of the stone. Twice around that one. There we go, and then back around this one. And check often to make sure that these are staying as straight as you can make them. And notice how they're almost pointing out, just a little bit, just super subtly, so that as these want to pull it in, they're going to end up staying straight is what we want. All right. You can even bring your stone in and compare. It's not looking too bad. You actually have to do that to know when you've woven the right amount of length. I know I'm not there yet, so I was just checking for width at this point, making sure that I'm not going all over the place, making things super, super wonky. This is all delicate work. You see why I wanted to have a little bit of weaving to started, because that's like my handle. That's what I need to like hold on. That's what's holding everything stable, is that little bit of weaving. And if you only have like a few rows of weaving to kind of start everything off, well, your base wires are gonna like super flop around everywhere, and that just makes everything harder. All right. think I'm getting there. This doesn't take a super long time because you just don't need that much distance. So there is kind of a bend here. I'm just going to try and straighten that out. Part of that is my bottom. Ooh, I've got all kinds of weird. This is the kinking that you want to try and avoid, but that's okay. I think I can still straighten this out. So a little bit of minor kinking is okay. That's starting to look better. Okay. Tighten these all up. Bring in this stone here. So now these are always a little bit tricky because you do want them to kind of stand up straight, which this one is not currently doing. I'm going to get rid of this lower one again. Okay. Sometimes these little stones get a little bit finicky and they drop all over the place. That's not abnormal at this point. All right, so something like what you kind of need to do is get that point at the bottom in the right spot, that it's going to stand up flat the right distance from these half round wires. I hope that kind of makes some sense. I had it. Don't. This always takes a bit of fiddling. These little stones are like that. Okay, so something like that. Now, there's no easy way to just do this. You kind of just have to hold the stone in place and start shaping these half round wires over each side of it. This isn't easy. I feel like I need to actually squish this in, get that tight. There, that's starting to. If you're not 100% happy with that first fold, bend, however you want to say it, I just want to get rid of this middle one that's giving me grief. I have a really deep point, like this particular stone is particularly tall compared to a lot of them, and I think that's what's giving me a hard time. I want to just move this over a couple of, that's poking me, a couple of spaces in the weaving there. And now I want to just sharpen this bend over that. So you can come in, if you're not 100% happy with how things are looking, and kind of, I like to come in from this angle because of that bend, and you can kind of sharpen some of these bends. All right, how are we doing? Get that back in there. There, that's starting to look right. So you see all that fiddling, things are jumping around. Completely normal. Don't think that it's not. It's not just you. That's just how little stones are. Do I have the right amount of weaving still? I think I do, actually. So I'm just going to bring this weave wire around to like the edge of my weave, just to kind of get it out of the way a little bit. Now, a couple more bends in these half round wires. We actually have to bend them down around our stone and in again. Okay. Oops. Make sure both sides are in place before doing your second one. And they're just going straight down and they're crossing each other here, okay? So that's completely normal. That's the profile that this is going to look like. Just ignore this bottom wire for now. I'll bring that back in after. But we have two more bends. We need to make these half round wires go straight down to back in line with our weaving so we can continue on with our weaving. And I just grab my pliers in here and make a bend. And again, I'm kind of straightening them out so that angle that I put in that first time, I'm kind of doing the opposite thing where you straighten it out like that. And there is a little bit of a gap there because I've got this other wire that goes in there. I can bring that back around now. And that is what I want to start weaving with. So let's just line everything back up, get everything tight. Hold this with your pliers and go in and check your stone. If there's looseness in there, you need to adjust this corner, suck it over a little bit so that these wires, once they're perfectly in line like that, hold this stone tightly. Okay, there's no movement in there. That's exactly what I want. Can I get any more weaving in here? I think that's gonna be okay. This is one of those moments where it's like, should I, shouldn't I? I think I'm okay. All right. So now you kind of have to hold everything in place and start your modified sumac again with all of these wires. So let's just do some straightening out of my base wires so when I start my weaving, I don't go crazy. I don't like going crazy. All right, so I'm going to start with my long stitch on the back. So those first two together, go down in between them. Another long stitch in the back. And then go down in between those two. Another long stitch in the back. Go down in between those two. Last, just want that tight, last long stitch in the back and go down. Now let's tighten everything up. There we go. I feel like I've got a wide spot right here. I'm just gonna squish just a little bit. You can even like tweak them that way. But the distance has to be right, otherwise this gemstone is going to move. And that's, oh, it is a little bit movey in there now that I adjusted these. That's gonna be okay. All right, let's continue on with our weaving. The long stitches in the front now, up in between them. Second long stitch in the front, up in between them. Third long stitch in the front, up in between them. Last long stitch in the front, up in between them. All right, I would do no less than about 3 full rotations. What I've done is 1 full rotation where the long stitch is first in the back and then it's in the front and it goes all the way across both sides. That's 1 full rotation. I wouldn't do less than 3 of those before mounting another stone. I've seen it done with less. I'm always nervous that like these little tiny little wires are just gonna bust and things are gonna give out. And that is not what we want. All right. Couple more quick rows of, where am I? This one here, of weaving. And the more weaving you get, the more solid everything feels and the faster this can go. Trying to keep things from tangling. All right, that's 2. Let me do 1 more. And then I'm going to mount this flat back stone for you on the same piece just to show you the steps involved in that. Really, the only difference is the weave that I'm going to do behind the stone. And it's kind of the reason I left that middle wire in for this project, because for the flat back stone, having that middle wire there is a good thing, whereas for the pointed back stone, it's not a good thing. So those are all things to consider as you make your designs. You can use thicker base wires if you want. You can use, I wouldn't recommend thinner base wires than this. 21 gauge is about as thin as you want to make these. It just gets too hard to do this weaving around anything less than that. Or if you do want to go down, use a thinner weave wire too. Go to like a 28 or a 30 gauge weave wire, and then using these smaller gauges won't be such a big deal. Using 21 gauge weave wire, 21 gauge base wires and 26 gauge weave wires is actually breaking my rule of having 6 wire gauges in between your base wire and your weave wire, which is partly what makes this a little bit more tedious and time consuming and delicate. All right, I just need to untwist this a little bit because I'm weaving right off on my spool and I've got this twist going on in my wire, and that's not gonna help as I need more wire. So I just need a moment to untwist everything. All right, there we go. I could have untwisted my spool too, but this was easier. So I've got my 3 full modified sumac weaves. I am now going to, again, bend these half round wires up in a V. Just like that. And my little gem is going to sit in there like that when I'm done. But first I need to do some weaving behind it. It's not as crucial, but I worry that like these edge ones aren't going to catch, and then it's gonna, I don't know. I also just need to bring my weave wire over. So I am going to do a modified sumac with this, but again, I have to be super careful that I'm not going to pull my base wires in together. And so this is actually exactly the same weave that we were doing here and here, but I'm doing it with only 3 wires now. And I can't pull very hard at all because I don't want my base wires to come in. I need them to sort of stay as wide as they are. So this will just take another couple minutes of weaving. Make sure your weave wires are slightly, just slightly pointed out so that, can you see these? These are my half round wires. I'm trying to get out of the way here. I just want to gently bend them over so I'm not scratching my camera. All right. Weaving away. Make sure to compress your weave so it looks nice. Although this is completely hidden, so I guess it's not about looking nice, it's just about being tight. This is really giving me grief here. All right, there we go. Okay, all set up. Get these tight, get those bent out of the way, get these pointed out a little. Everything's good to go again. All right. So you got to be really careful not to suck these in. Oops, that's too dramatic. And wow, this is maddening. Alright, what's going on here? Untwist this. Holy cow. Why is this giving me such grief? I'm sorry, Josh, probably edit this out a little bit. Twist, 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 twist. Most maddening. These pliers are endlessly getting caught in my wire. Alright. Dealing with all the twisting in my wire. And bring this around again. All right. I feel like this is totally getting a tiny bit narrower. This is something that just, it's really easy for it to happen. We're just trying to not let it. I should have probably used a 28 gauge weave wire instead of a 26 gauge, and that would have given me a little less grief. It's because I'm trying to weave on these thin 21 gauge base wires. Strongly recommend you stick with something thicker. Too much wire in the way. I'm just literally spooling it back up so that it's not just bouncing all over the place and in the way. I'm probably having a hard enough time keeping all these wires straight as it is, so having that extra one bouncing around isn't going to help. There we go. Much nicer to work there. Alright, I feel like I must be getting close to the right amount of weaving. Pick up my stone, wedge it in there. I think that's pretty darn close too, to just the right amount. So now you kind of have to hold it perfectly centered and start to bend these around and across the top. And if you can do them, you know, one a little bit and the other a little bit, and kind of do them at the same time as much as possible, that's going to help with everything coming into balance. So they're kind of going across the top there, and so now I got to go down the other side. And so when you do this, you don't want to just like make this V narrower, because it's just going to push the stone out of the way. And so you have to kind of keep this as it is and just bend this down. And again, we're crossing towards the center again. Bring this down the other side. So that's kind of what we want. And then from here, get your pliers back in here and get them wedged right up in between your other wires. So when you do this bend, this wire is going to end up flat in the same plane as your other wires. And so what happens when I just squish that down solid, I think that's going to be okay. That's in there pretty tight. It's not moving. Just continue on with my modified sumac. I want to angle that in and that out a little bit. There. And that looks a little better, I think. And so we want to keep this back straight. Sometimes if you're not careful how you're bending these, this back part can actually bulge too, especially with these pointed stones. That's not really ideal, especially if you want to put this against something flat. But, you know, do the best you can. So we are aiming towards keeping this back weaving flat. Bring this around. I think I'm ready for my long stitch on the front and up in between them. All right. Long stitch on the front, up in between them. Long stitch in the front, up in between them. Long stitch in the front, up in between them. Alright, I'm going to stop after only that half pass and just make sure everything's still sitting flat and in line. Make sure there's no twisting happening with my half round wires. Brought it around the top a second time. My long stitch is in the back. I'm going down in between them. Second long stitch in the back. Third long stitch in the back. And last long stitch in the back. Alright, so that's basically the gist of how to make these, okay? I always leave some extra tails on each end when I do this, so that I can tie this in somehow to another piece. It's totally up to you if you want to just you know, put some curly cues on here and make a loop, and then you have a pair of earrings. Done. Or if you want to do this around a bangle or whatever. There's a lot of different ways to use this. I even brought in a special project that I made for my hubby. I'm going to have to like back this camera way up. Excuse my snap of that. All right, because I want you to see the full beauty of this. It's a water buffalo drinking horn, okay? It had this brass rim on the top that we wanted to match. So this is a leather frog that he made. Can we get in close and get a good shot of this? There we go. I have used 9, actually technically 3 rounds of 3 square wires as my base wires, and I've used a half round wire as my weave wire. So this weaving goes a lot faster because I'm literally just weaving around the outside. I am squeezing every weave with my pliers so that these bends are sharp and they all come out flat and looking so uniform and nice. But I've literally just used one of the square base wires to come up around over my stones. This was a tricky project because, let's see if I can get it here. This is a continuous loop. There is no end. And that feature alone was quite the challenge, okay? There's some not perfect spacing there. I will totally admit to my flaws and mistakes. In order to make this endless, it was a bit of a trick. I had to start with 3 pieces of wire that each had 3 loops, 3 revolutions. The middle 3 was just the 3 revolutions, and then the outer 2 kind of moved in opposite directions, and I had 2 wires coming out over the top. So it was 2 square wires, and then my square wire that went over my stone, and then 3 square wires, and then my other square wire that went over my stone, and then 2 more square wires on the outside. So that's what the inside of these wraps looks like. And I kind of just had to have 2 loose tails as I worked around that grabbed onto all of these stones. And then when I was done that one, he's like, now I need another matching one for the bottom. So I had to make another one for the bottom. They turned out pretty good. I was actually surprised at how well the square and the half round wire works. You can see this is where I had to cut my ends and like mangle them together, and I don't know. It's hard to describe that. This was not an easy project, but it was a lot of fun, and I was really happy how it turned out. But I wanted to show you that if you don't have half round wire, if you only have square wire and half round wire, you can still mount small stones. Okay, it's exactly the same technique that we just showed you. So try it, have lots of fun. If you have any questions, please let me know. Enjoy.